On the night of February 1st, 1959, 9 experienced hikers pitched their tent on the slopes of the Ural Mountains in Russia. They were young, they were prepared, and they were excited for the adventure ahead. But something went terribly wrong that night. Something so horrifying, so inexplicable, that when search teams found their bodies weeks later, even the most seasoned investigators were left speechless. Their tent was slashed open from the inside. Their bodies were found scattered across the frozen landscape, some nearly naked in -30-degree temperatures. One victim was missing her tongue and eyes. Another had a crushed skull, but no external injuries. And perhaps most disturbing of all, their clothing was found to be radioactive. This is the story of the DYATLOV Pass incident, Europe's most terrifying, unsolved mystery. And after more than 60 years, we still don't know what really happened that night. Our story begins in January 1959 in the city of Sverdlovsk, now known as Yekaterinburg, Russia. A group of 10 experienced hikers, all students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, assembled for what they called a Category 3 expedition. This was the highest difficulty rating for ski expeditions in the Soviet Union. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor DYATLOV, a skilled mountaineer and engineering student. The team consisted of 8 men and 2 women, all in their early 20s, except for one member, Alexander Zolotaryov, who was 37 years old and the most experienced of the group. Their plan was ambitious but straightforward. They would trek nearly 200 miles through the northern Ural Mountains to reach Oterten Mountain, a journey that would take approximately 3 weeks. For these young adventurers, it was the trip of a lifetime. On January 27, 1959, the group took a train to Ivdel, a small town at the edge of the wilderness. The next day, they continued by truck to Vijay, the last inhabited settlement before entering the vast, frozen wilderness of the Urals. One member of the group, Yuri Yudin, turned back due to illness. This decision would save his life. He would be the only survivor, not by surviving what happened at the pass, but by never being there at all. The remaining 9 hikers continued into the mountains. According to Dyatlov's journal and the group's photographs, they were in high spirits. They were laughing, joking, and documenting their journey with cameras. Everything seemed perfectly normal. On January 31st, the group arrived at the edge of a highland area and began preparing for the most difficult part of their journey. They stored surplus food and equipment in a temporary camp, planning to collect it on their way back. This would be one of the last documented decisions they would make alive. On February 1st, 1959, the hikers began their ascent toward Oterten Mountain. However, as weather conditions worsened, they appear to have made a critical decision. Instead of heading northwest toward their destination, they turned west and started climbing the slopes of an area the indigenous Mansi people called Kholat Syakhl, which translates to Dead Mountain. Why they changed course remains unclear. Some believe it was a navigational error caused by poor visibility. Others think they deliberately chose to camp on the mountainside to gain experience in more challenging terrain. What we do know is this. Sometime in the late evening of February 1st or early morning of February 2nd, the 9 hikers set up their tent on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. And then something happened. Something that caused experienced mountaineers to tear open their tent from the inside and flee into the brutal Siberian night, many of them barefoot or in their socks, inadequately dressed for temperatures that had plummeted to -25 to -30 degrees Celsius. The hikers had agreed to send a telegram to their sports club as soon as they returned to Vijay, expected around February 12th. When this deadline passed with no word, there was initial concern but no immediate alarm. It was common for such expeditions to be delayed. But as days turned into a week with no communication, officials began to worry. On February 20th, the first search parties were organized. Volunteers, students from the university, and military personnel were deployed into the mountains. What they found 6 days later would become one of the most disturbing crime scenes in history. On February 26th, searchers discovered the abandoned tent on the slope of Kholat Shakal. The scene was immediately recognized as wrong, deeply wrong. The tent had been cut open from the inside, with long slashes running through the fabric. Inside, the searchers found the hikers' belongings still neatly arranged. Boots, warm clothing, and supplies all left behind. Just outside the tent, footprints were visible in the snow. 8 or 9 sets of tracks, some barefoot, some in socks, others in single felt boots, leading down the slope toward the tree line nearly a mile away. The footprints suggested the hikers had left the tent in an orderly fashion, not in complete panic, but they were severely underdressed for the freezing conditions. At the forest edge, under a large cedar tree, searchers made their first grim discovery. 2 bodies, those of Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko, were found lying near the remains of a small fire. Both were barefoot and dressed only in underwear. The branches of the cedar tree above them had been broken up to a height of 5 meters, suggesting someone had climbed the tree, possibly to look back toward the tent or to scan the area for danger. Between the cedar tree and the tent, search teams found 3 more bodies over the following days. Igor DYATLOV, the group's leader, was found on his back, hand raised as if trying to grab onto something. Zenaida Kolmogorova and Rustem Slobodin were found in position suggesting they were trying to return to the tent. All 3 appeared to have died from hypothermia. But the real mystery was just beginning. 4 members of the group were still missing: Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Alexander Kolevatov. It would take 2 more months to find them. In May, as the snow began to melt, searchers discovered the remaining 4 bodies in a ravine about 75 meters from the cedar tree. They were better dressed than the others, and here's where things became truly bizarre. Some were wearing clothes taken from those who had already died. Dubinina was wearing Krivonishenko's pants and one of Doroshenko's sweaters. But it was the condition of these bodies that sent shockwaves through the investigation. The autopsies revealed injuries that defied explanation. Lyudmila Dubinina and Alexander Zolotaryov had massive chest fractures, ribs broken so severely that the medical examiner compared the force required to that of a high-speed car crash. Yet there were no external wounds, no bruises, no signs of a struggle. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had severe skull damage, again, with no external trauma. And most disturbingly, Dubinina's tongue, eyes, and part of her lips were missing. The medical examiner noted these were not removed by human hands, but the tissue was absent. The official medical conclusion stated that the force required to cause such internal injuries without external damage would be similar to the impact of a car crash. But there were no cars on that remote mountainside. No falling rocks were found near the bodies. No signs of an avalanche. And then there was the radiation. When investigators examined the clothing of some victims, particularly those found in the ravine, they discovered elevated levels of radioactive contamination. Some clothing items showed radiation levels significantly higher than normal background radiation. Investigators also found strange details in the photographs recovered from the hikers' cameras. The last photo on Krivonishenko's camera appeared to show lights in the night sky, though this image is heavily disputed, and many believe it was simply a processing error or accidental exposure. Local Mansi people reported seeing strange orange spheres in the sky around the time of the incident. Other hikers in the area, camping about 50 kilometers away, reported seeing strange glowing orange orbs floating in the night sky on the night of February 1st. The initial investigation concluded in May 1959 with a bizarre final statement. The hikers died due to a compelling natural force that they could not overcome. The case was then sealed and classified by Soviet authorities. For over 60 years, investigators, scientists, and amateur sleuths have proposed dozens of theories to explain what happened that night. Let's examine the most credible ones. Theory 1: Avalanche. The most recent scientific explanation, published in 2021, suggests that a delayed slab avalanche struck the tent. Researchers used modern computer simulations and Disney's frozen snow animation technology to demonstrate how a small avalanche could have caused the chest injuries. However, critics point out that no avalanche debris was found at the tent site, and experienced mountaineers would likely recognize avalanche danger. Theory 2: Katabatic winds. Some researchers propose that powerful katabatic winds, cold air masses that flow down mountain slopes, created infrasound frequencies that induced panic and irrational behavior. Studies have shown that certain sound frequencies can cause feelings of dread, anxiety, and even hallucinations. This might explain why they fled the tent, but not the severe injuries. Theory 3: Military testing. The presence of radiation and the reports of glowing orange spheres have led many to believe the hikers stumbled upon a secret military test. The area was relatively close to known Soviet military installations. Some speculate they witnessed a missile test gone wrong, or were accidentally exposed to weapons testing. The Soviet government's decision to immediately seal the case only fueled this theory. Theory 4: Paradoxical undressing. Medical experts point to a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing, where hypothermia victims, in the final stages of freezing to death, feel inexplicably hot and remove their clothing. This explains why some bodies were found partially undressed, but it doesn't explain what made them leave the tent in the first place, nor does it explain the massive internal injuries. Theory 5: Human attack. Could the Mansi people, upset about intruders in an area they considered sacred, have attacked the hikers? Investigators ruled this out early. The Mansi were peaceful, and there was no evidence of combat. The footprints showed the hikers walked calmly from the tent, not ran in terror. And locals had no reason or history of such violence. Theory 6: Infighting. Some suggest the group had an internal conflict that escalated fatally. However, the evidence strongly contradicts this. The hikers were found in groups apparently trying to help each other. They shared clothing. There were no defensive wounds or signs of interpersonal violence. So what really happened on Dead Mountain that night in February 1959? In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation. In 2020, they officially concluded that an avalanche was the cause. But many experts remain unconvinced. The evidence simply doesn't fit neatly into any single explanation. Perhaps the truth is a combination of factors. Perhaps a small avalanche or snowslide damaged the tent and injured some members. Disoriented and injured, the group fled to the forest. The brutal cold caused hypothermia. In their confused state, they may have sustained additional injuries falling into the ravine. The radiation could have been from camping equipment or was simply misreported in the Soviet-era analysis. Or perhaps there was something else on that mountain that night. Something we still don't understand. Something that caused 9 experienced hikers to make a decision that cost them their lives. The DYATLOV Pass has become a dark pilgrimage site. Every year, adventurers trek to the location, trying to understand what happened. The area has been renamed DYATLOV Pass in honor of the victims. What we know for certain is this: 9 young people went into those mountains full of life and ambition. They never came back. Their families never got real answers. And after more than 6 decades, the mountain keeps its secrets. The DYATLOV Pass incident remains one of the most compelling unsolved mysteries in modern history. And perhaps that's exactly how it will remain. A chilling reminder that some questions may never be answered. If you found this video fascinating, make sure to subscribe